So I just wanted to introduce him to you, Randall, and give you a taste of what he's wanting to bring to the table.
Okay.
And he works in longevity. So, you know, when you were talking about the plasmoids and the potential for healing and everything, I thought Elias could be a good fit for that. And Sanaz was the person that brought Elias to us. So I wouldn't have known about Elias without Sanaz.
Okay.
And Sanaz is going to be our live stream how-to correspondent in April.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You got a pretty face there, finally.
Finally, it's about time. Well, you know, I've been complaining to Robert for a couple of years now, so.
Paid off.
Okay.
Well,
So,
why don't you give just an introduction, Elias, to Randall?
Sure. I guess I've been good to meet you all, and I guess I've been really fortunate to. I guess I'll start with a bit of my personal backstory. Maybe that I was that kid in gym class that was like at the end of the track when everybody was doing like the runs around the field. I was like the last guy.
I remember.
I was that kid. Yeah, the guy who couldn't do a single push-up, who was like, like shaking when he was trying to do a single push-up. So I was that kid, and then when I went into college, I actually had a bit of an epiphany actually with my grandfather, who was, I was at the time 18 and he was like 68. And I realized how strong and healthy he was. And it just completely transformed my idea that, around health and longevity, although I didn't have that terminology back then, how it's kind of like a lifestyle commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got involved in exercise science in college. I studied athletics. I was also a triathlete, and I've sort of moved in and out of very different things in my life. But one of the things that was also another interesting foundation is my father graduated with a degree in comparative religion. So when I was growing up, on the same bookshelf was the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, the Dharmapada, the Quran were all on the same shelf. So I never grew up with this idea that there was a hierarchy of belief around religious ideas. It was more like there was a spectrum of human perception around what is the meaning of life, if you will, or what are the deeper aspects of life. So I spent much of my life merging those two worlds in my own personal journey, trying to understand what is the deeper meaning of this reality that we all find ourselves in, and how does it work? But then also understanding that there has to be something about the body that's extremely important to value. And then how do I kind of hold those two things together? And so what I've been doing recently is I'm very much into the science of longevity. I'm a bit of a hard scientist in that sense. I like to look at the research. I like to look at the data. I like to do testing. I'm a bit of a citizen scientist myself, where I conduct a lot of this research on myself as well, constantly different wearables, trying different protocols. But what I've done recently was I started to realize that I could actually start to weave in some of my scholarly exploration of religion and philosophy into longevity, because I actually think the biggest challenge we're going to have, because we're about to enter, and Sanaz has been pivotal to help me understand the way to think about this, is we're about to enter a post-human era. The combination of AI and longevity technologies are going to accelerate in the next 5 years at a pace that most people don't even have any idea is going to happen. And that's going to mean that people are going to start merging with technology to extend their life and to even transform the way their bodies operate so that they can be healthier in a way. And there is the science that it will actually be able to, modify our bodies and our cells to be healthier. But we're not even thinking about the ethical and moral and philosophical and spiritual implications of that. We have no idea. We have no framework for this. This is completely novel to the human species. And we're not even talking about that. Like, we're just going straight forward as if it's like whatever, And so I think this is a really interesting time to weave that in. And but because I'm also involved in the actual research and the science, I'm not coming at this as an outsider who's maybe against these ideas. I actually support some of them, but I also think there needs to be a a moment where we take a breath and talk about it. And I don't see that happening. So I kind of like to talk about both things. Like talk about like the how we got here, like I did a talk that you can see that for a group that's affiliated with RadFest. These people are the radical longevity people. These are the people who want to live 1,000 years. So they're full on to whatever it takes to do that. So their ideas are radical life extension. So I did a talk for them about the sort of the tree of eternal life. And what is the symbol meanings of that? What is the symbology of the tree of eternal life? And then how does that play into a new belief system around longevity merged with technology and science? So I was talking to Robert about this event, and I was going to talk a little bit about the quest for immortality. And there's all of our traditions, all of our philosophical traditions probably have at least one mythic figure that went on that quest, who tried to get the nectar of the gods or steal it, like a Promethean type of journey to like steal that information to become godlike and eternal or immortal. And they've always failed. But here we are at the cusp of success. So what does that mean? We don't have the myth for that. We don't have the story for when humanity actually gets the ambrosia from the gods. We don't have that myth. So what do we do?
Yeah, this is also like a lot of the conversations that I also hear at the biotech conferences, because as an outsider, I'm going in and learning about digital immortality, or just all of the protocols that go into longevity. And it's kind of scary that there isn't a conversation about the spirit at all. It's very reductionist, transhumanist. And Elias and I are interested in bringing in the nature aspect into that epigenetic expression that we're going to witness collectively, right, with all of these new technologies.
What do you think, Randall?
Well, I'm thinking that I'm seeing a natural segue between what Elias would be presenting and the angle that I can take in talking about the Grail, because one essential component of the tradition of the Holy Grail is, I think, represented very effectively in Wolfram von Eschenbach's Parzival, that was written in the late 12th century. I'll just read one paragraph from it. It is well known to me that many brave knights dwell with the Grail at Montsalvache. Always when they ride out, as they often do, it is to seek adventure. They do so for their sins, these Templars, whether their reward be by defeat or victory. A valiant host lives there, and I will tell you how they are sustained. They live from a stone of the purest essence. It is called lapis exilis. By the power of this stone, the phoenix is burned to ashes, but from the ashes she is reborn. Thus does the phoenix molt and change her plumage, which afterward is bright and shining and lovely as before. This stone confers such powers on mortal men, so that their flesh and bones are made young again. The stone is called the Grail, and it is unknown save to those who are singled out by name to join the company of the Montsalvache. So that's a key central feature of the whole Grail mythos, is this idea of rejuvenation.
Yes.
Of restoration, not only in a spiritual, but also a physical level. And it applies not only to the individual, but to the planet as a whole, because the Grail not only heals the body, it heals the wasteland. So that's going to be the theme that I'm going to try to approach and weave into this presentation on the Grail. So I could see that there's a natural interface between what you're doing and how I could tailor my presentation on the Grail.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Robert has me leading into the event. He actually has me opening. So I leading into your talk on the Friday night. So I'm happy that we're having this call so I can get a better sense of that, and we can sort of riff off each other, because I'm very open to whatever ideas, you bring to the table, obviously. And the thing that I think is interesting to that story is, so now that idea of rejuvenation at the cellular level that they're talking about in that piece is exactly what happened in January of 2022. So in January 2022, there were researchers that took essentially the equivalent of a 75-year-old mouse, and they changed the cells of a 75-year-old mouse into that of a 25-year-old mouse, and using these specific sort of genetic factors and these sort of measuring factors in the cells. And when they did that, within a matter of a very short order, there was a small consortium formed that raised almost immediately $6 billion. And of that 6 billion, it's estimated about half of it came from Jeff Bezos, called Altus Labs. And what they did is then they went and they literally plucked all of the top longevity scientists, these guys from Spain, this group from the UK, this group from Japan, and literally put them into this black box lab with $6 billion of play money to literally figure out how to do that to humans as fast as possible, so that all of the billionaires that are currently alive can get access to that technology basically before they die. So we actually have now the science to literally create that level of cellular rejuvenation. And again, most people don't even realize this is happening, but again, I can point to all the science. I can show all of the data that Altus Labs was formed. This is the capital they raised. They literally don't even know who's funding this. Like, the Bezos is not confirmed. It's essentially estimated that he was one of the key people behind it, but we don't know for sure. So I'll just report exactly that. Like, we don't know, but this is what has been sort of the rumors that are going around. And there's a tremendous movement towards this, because the goal is that, you know, with the combination of the AI technology and how fast it's doubling every 6 months, which is way beyond Moore's law, which freaks me out. I can't believe that, you know, with already what we're seeing with Chat GPT is like, that's actually a couple years old compared to what Google has, and it's doubling every 6 months. So we can't even imagine how advanced this AI is going to be in 5 years. So we merge that with the idea that full cellular rejuvenation will be possible for human cells in the next 5 years, you know, or so. Like, that's, so they call, in the longevity space, they call this longevity escape velocity. So it's the idea that if you can keep yourself alive right now long enough, that they'll have technologies, say in 10 years, that can reverse your age 20 years. And then 10 years after that, they'll be able to get you 30 years younger. Then you have achieved what they call longevity escape velocity, which means is if you, as long as you can stay alive at the speed with which the technology doubles, you could essentially become immortal. And that's literally the belief of a large number of people. Well, not a small group of people on this planet, but people who have the resources to try to make that possible.
Sounds good to me. Sounds real good.
Right. Well, what would you do with all that extra time, right?
Oh,
like
listen, my list would easily require a millennium.
Right.
Look, just look at those books on my bookshelf. I probably only actually read a quarter of them.
Right.
And every one of them is like, oh God, this looks so interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, the places I want to go yet, the things that I want to do, the things that I want to learn. Oh yeah. I mean, look, you know, I'm at the age where I guess most people are wanting to retire. That's the last thing I'm interested in. Right. I want to, like, I'm ready to launch 2 new careers, you know.
That's good. Well, that's part of staying young. That right there, though, that's a huge part of staying young. Like, that's literally, to me, one of the key factors in this whole thing. Because when you get old is when you get like fixed in time and space, you know what I mean? And you no longer are able to adapt to the movement of reality. And, you know, you're obviously in the flow. So that's, your spirit is young. And that's what, you know, it's kind of what we also want to do, is keep our body in line with where our spirit is. That's
what I'm trying to do too. I've had setbacks, you know, injuries that have kind of derailed me. But I kind of started out like you, Elias. I mean, I was kind of a nerd in high school, but right after I got out of high school, I discovered yoga, got into yoga real heavily, got into martial arts. I started training, doing long distance running, and then I participated in marathon canoe races. And yeah, so I mean, I stayed, and then I did construction work for decades and decades, and stayed in real good shape. But a couple of injuries, you know, sidelined me. And then, you know, the pandemic here, you know, basically what happened was my business that I was out there still, slinging a trowel, swinging a hammer, climbing ladders, carrying stuff, doing
wow.
all of this in the outdoors every day. And then when the housing recession hit between 2009, 2011, and the economy tanked and construction went down, my company went from, I had 18 employees. I went down to 1 employee within a year. The good thing upside of that is that's when I really began to segue over more into the teaching and the research and presenting. However, I was used to this high metabolism day outdoors every day working. And so then with the 2 injuries, one to my lower back and one in my neck, which are actually doing a little bit better now, but yeah, that sidelined me. And so I'm really in a phase now where I'm trying to like readjust the physical body, get these things corrected. And, I've had a major economic setback. Then I had kind of partnered with somebody who stole about $200,000 from me, and I had to recover from that. Pretty much I've
Wow.
recovered from that now. So I'm in a position now where I'm ready to really, circle back
Well,
to
where are you based?
in Decatur, Georgia, just
Okay.
outside of Atlanta.
Well, happy to get you on any longevity protocols you want. I know all the people. I have access to all the resources, so we can
That's
definitely.
excellent. Well, I'm definitely on board with that. The longevity thing interests me ever since I read a book by Timothy Leary back in the early 70s. And then I went and I heard a lecture from him.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you remember, Elias, he had the SMILE scenario, SMI²LE.
I studied a fair bit of Leary, so yeah,
Yeah. SMILE, the LE was life extension.
yeah.
The I squared was intelligence increase, which I kind of see going along, because the thing in my mind is that I think about the great minds of history, the great thinkers, the great scientists, the creative people. And, you go, well, geez, if they only lived 70 or 80 years, Newton dies in his 80s, Einstein dies in his 80s. What if they could go on for another half century or more?
Yeah.
It seems like such a loss to humanity decades ago, that just struck me. And then of course, immersing myself in traditional accounts, not just the biblical account, but, a lot of stories come from olden times about longevity.
Yeah,
And
there's a lot of stories and myths where it's woven in that people were living extended periods of time, and you wonder,
yes,
how much of that was just I don't know, exaggeration, if you will. It seems to me that there's definitely, it's very possible that the way we're living now, obviously, is so disconnected from nature. Who knows?
yeah.
We're not. There's a lot of things we're probably not getting out of the world that we could be.
Some of the things that, I've really loved mythology since I was a kid and have read a lot of mythology. And, one of the things that has really intrigued me, Robert knows this well, because this forms the basis of a lot of the tours and traveling and field research that I do, which has to do with the geological history of this planet and the story that's preserved in the earth itself. And, I've read dozens of accounts of, tremendous catastrophes, world destroying floods and fires and things. Well, I've done enough field research to know that the idea of a world destroying flood is a literal truth, not necessarily in the fundamentalist sense of like supernatural waters rising to the top of mountains and
Right.
then mysteriously disappearing, but floods that literally, using sophisticated paleohydrological tools, can be measured in the peak discharges of 1 billion cubic feet per second. Now, most people would have no framework to even think of what 1 billion cubic feet per second means, but I'll tell you what it means. It's a flood that could perhaps wipe out an entire state, as a middle-sized state. It could literally flush away anything that was there on the size of multiple states, as a matter of fact. And so when you realize that these kinds of things are not, that they're literal, they're not, in the stories of these floods are not exaggerated. They're not exaggerated accounts of local or regional floods that got, expanded through the repeated telling and so forth. No, when you have 500 million or 1 billion cubic feet per second, and these floods are real, and they can be caused by two sources. One, catastrophically melting ice sheets during glacial ages, or the second is massive tsunamis. And I collect a lot of information like you do, Elias, but my information has basically been like collecting the data that's out there now from the last 10 or 20 years, showing the evidence of unbelievably huge tsunamis that have, that would have completely obliterated any coastal community of any size whatsoever, or, a billion cubic feet per second. So here's the point I'm getting at. At some point, maybe 20 years ago, in that, as I'm beginning to wrap my head around the scale of these events, I'm going, well, no, these myths are not exaggerated, and they're not just metaphorical. There is actual physical evidence that has preceded these stories. So then I begin to extrapolate to, well, okay, if that's the case with this one particular myth, that it is literal, that there's literal truth to it, what about the other myths? How many of the other myths could have had literal truth to them? Myths about the gods, for example. What is the literal truth behind the stories of the gods that every culture has? What is the literal truth behind the stories of extended longevity lifespans in ancient times that I've now encountered in probably a half a dozen different accounts beyond just the biblical account? So then I ask the question, what is the literal truth behind this? And so this now brings me back to the conversation of, what is now happening, and could what we're learning now, could there be some subset of that knowledge that actually is a recovery of something that we once knew and then lost?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can frame that up on my side, and you can tee it off on your side, basically, because I guess I've looked at that past. I see those myths and those ideas. It kind of, as a modern scientist, I lay it out from a very, I'm a bit of that sort of skeptical and cautious scientist, in the sense, like, I don't know, but I do believe that there's knowledge here. And it's very fascinating to me. But this is what I can say around what's happening in this particular moment in time, like what we actually have the capacity to do now. And that does play into this idea, though, that if, and I do believe, between us on this call, and I mean, I'm not afraid to say this publicly either, is that I do believe that there's been different types of technological advancements on this planet that are not tied to the way we think of technology, right? Because we are so locked into this idea that the power is in the silicon chip, for example. And it's like, that's just one way to access and process technology with human ingenuity. I imagine there's other ways that human ingenuity has been able to process technology and create technology in ways that we can't quite comprehend. And I know that's the work that, you and Graham Hancock and all these other, people willing to kind of openly challenge these ideas and say, like, well, how are these things done thousands of years ago if they didn't have some type of tech? Like, it really wasn't a guy with a bamboo stick making this thing, come together. It just doesn't make any sense, So we gotta leave some space in our consciousness for the idea that there's probably things that we don't quite comprehend, or that we, not everything has to fit into our little modern narrow box. We just think we're the best, right? So we can't suggest that there's another way that might have even been better and simpler, possibly, because it's a lot of work. Like, I think what's fascinating that you just said, and I don't want to lose this before we run out of time, but you talk that the Grail was not only rejuvenating to the people, but to the planet. And so what has happened then, that our technology that is creating rejuvenation for humans is at the expense of the planet? And how do we square that reality and that truth? And how do we look at that? And I think that's an important idea, because what's the point of living forever on a dystopian hellscape? It doesn't even, it's not even worth it.
No, I would certainly agree with that. Yeah.
So I think that's a fascinating piece that we would like. That's one of the other things Sanaz and I are trying to weave into the longevity community, is we're building an ecosystem because we want to try to replicate natural systems. So we want to see, how do we bring the longevity community and the research and the scientists and even the businesses we build into a way that we can actually create an ecosystem that's based upon living in the principles of nature, in harmony with nature, but still be doing what we need to do to advance longevity. So that's the project we're working on. It's called the Healthspan Ecosystem Advancing Longevity, or HEAL.
Wow. And Robert, are you going to have a link to that?
Yeah, I'll get a link. I'll get that to you. Yeah, and I'll definitely put it in the promo too. And I remember what you said, Randall, about the mythos of the Grail, in that when the king is ailing, so is the land, or vice versa. If the land is ailing, that will affect the king, or you know, we may see the king as leadership. So if we restore the land, that could help restore leadership, or vice versa. But right now, it doesn't look like we have good leadership.
We don't have either, right? Yeah, we don't have either. Our sovereign archetypes are narcissistic sociopaths, and the planet
put, Elias. Yes.
And the planet is a reflection of that group, and the two are sort of coexisting at the same you know, sad vibration of consciousness, you know. And so
we need a new myth.
yeah, we need a new myth, and we need better leadership. We need better leadership. So that's again, like, what we're coming at this through the angle of longevity, because basically my estimation, and you know, I think Sana has gotten to our community because she agrees, what's going to happen in longevity in the next 5 years is going to make the internet, like the .com boom, look like a kid's, you know, tea party once this actually takes off. It's going to happen so fast, it's going to make your head spin. What's going to happen here?
My thought, Elias, on that is that, you know, it kind of confers a responsibility on us that, of course, you know, I think like the way you came at it, the way I came at it, was that I begin to see that there is a great work that we could do if we had the means to do it. And so I come at it from that standpoint, like, what could I accomplish? What could I build? What could I create? How could I improve this planet if I had those extra decades of life? And so that, rather than just, I just want extra life so that I can just do whatever I want, I can sit around and whatever, watch TV all day, or just, you know, party all the time or whatever. You know, I didn't come at it from that standpoint. I came at it from the standpoint of, well, I could see all of this potential of things that we could do to make this world a better place. But one of the primary obstacles that we've got to achieving that is that we only live 80 years, and that's not enough time, you know? So it circles back to that, you know, I think it needs to start with the people who have a worthy vision that would justify them living for centuries. But of course, my thought is that probably people that are going to be pursuing that are also going to have a philosophical orientation to life and reality that makes them predisposed towards doing something of value, doing something constructive with that, if they attain decades of extra life. The way I used to put it was, well, let's see, I will stay, and it's kind of following, what did you call it? Maybe you'll refresh me on the terminology, but if we can live X number of years until these
a longevity escape velocity. Yeah, longevity escape velocity.
My version,
that's Aubrey de Grey, his term. Okay. You ever see him? He's got this big, he's got more gray hair and bigger beard than you. So
well, I can work on that.
But he's not as handsome.
No.
I mean, what can I say? But I used to say, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to strive to get to be 100. And if I can just reverse, you know, because in the biblical stories, it was the antediluvian patriarchs that could live a factor of 10 longer. You know, Lamech lived to be 777. Methuselah lived to be 969, right? So that was the range. I mean, literally a factor of 10. So I thought, okay, and then right after the flood, the lifespan was reduced to 120 years,
Mhm.
according to the biblical narrative, which most of us in the Western world were raised in some extent. So I always kind of use that. And I said, well, what I'm going to do is if we can get to that 120 years, that'll give me some extra, that'll buy me some time that we can maybe get to the 900 years.
Right.
So in a way, I was formulating that idea of longevity escape velocity, 20 or 30 years ago, thinking that way. So it's satisfying that there's actually a term for that now.
Yeah.
But
no,
this is exciting stuff. I love hearing this.
no, great. Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you, Sanaz and Robert, for inviting me to be involved. And so, yeah, happy to work on this, however we sort of, because like I said, it sounds like from, at least in the schedule, if it's as it is, I'm going to kind of, I guess I'm starting it off, Robert, with a bit of this longevity framework that I'll be bringing in, and then for everyone else to pick up on. So I'm going to kind of focus on reporting, I guess, so to speak, like what the science is now, some of the philosophy and how it weaves in, but I'm going to kind of leave it to, a lot of the other speakers who are maybe more deeply even in the philosophical and even the esoteric, if you will, of how that all sort of plays out. And I'll just talk a little bit more about like what's actually happening in the world, because as I said, there's a lot of people don't even realize what's actually happening on the scientific and the research side. And I think I want to weave in, because again, one of the reasons AI is going to be so powerful is because AI is going to be able to do the computations for the cellular rejuvenation systems that humans can't do right now. So when the AI gets to the point where, because human cells are so complex, we actually can't do the longevity interventions because we just simply can't calculate the parameters that would be need to, because we have 40 trillion cells. All of us on this call are 40 trillion cells. It's a lot of cells to manage. So how do you create and you have to create things that are personalized, because a lot of this is going to be like, we're going to create an exact therapeutic based upon your specific genetics, your microbiome, your cellular function, your everything. And then it'll be a personalized intervention that would be injected specifically into your body with all of your programming. And you're going to need a lot of powerful AI systems to be able to do that, do those computations.
Yeah, I think Yuval Harari said that the collection of biometric data is what is going to give birth to general artificial intelligence.
Right, because we'll be able to use the biometric data to kind of humanize it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot.
There's
It's
a
great.
lot of folks out there really, really scared of the AI thing. I'm not scared of it. I realize, it's probably got, like all things, there's a potential for tremendous good and there's also potential for evil. So it's just that, if the good people ignore it, though, that means it's going to have a greater propensity to be used for things we don't like. Whereas if the people, I think, who are at least, have some kind of a moral or ethical basis, are paying attention to it, utilizing it creatively and so on, that will be the antidote to it becoming another tool of suppression or tyranny or the imposition of totalitarianism, or some of the things that people are, and I think rightfully, concerned about, the misuse. But yeah, I mean, everything can be misused. My interest in getting further knowledge about the whole AI phenomena is so that, that I can learn more about the potential good uses of it. And it sounds like you're coming from a similar place, Elias.
Yeah, so but that's why we want to have a seat at the table. That's why we're building the HEAL Collective, because we want to have a seat. Because again, a lot of people are just saying, this is bad, stay away, don't go there. And our thought is, well, no, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're seceding that territory to whoever wants it.
Exactly what I'm
saying. That's stupid, because it's like, if we don't have a seat at the table, then the people who want to manipulate this and maybe implement totalitarian regimes with it, they're gonna dive in, right? But like, so let's dive in ourselves and have a seat at that table. And that's why we're building this whole collective. And we already have, dozens of members that we're pulling in who are all like major thought leaders, company owners, investors. Like we're really going to go all the way on this thing. We're going to make this a very large program. And I think the one piece, and just maybe I'll end on this because I know, we've gone through a fair bit of time, although you guys are crazy. You can go on and talk for like hours. Like when I saw like like I'm used to like a speaker having like, TED talk time, like 15 minutes, and you guys go like an hour and a half. I'm like, okay, these guys are hardcore. But the last thing I want to mention that I think is really interesting to me is with everything that I said that we're looking at in longevity and science and the research, I think one of the problems is, again, comes back to this idea we just said a moment ago, is like we're not grounded in the humility that we're not always the greatest thing that this planet has ever produced. And so if we have a little bit more humility and realize, the work you guys are doing about saying, well, maybe there's been other civilizations before this one that had different ways of operating, and that we can start to say like, because we're still in the Copernican, reality of we're the center of the universe, right? And that there's nothing else greater than us psychologically as a species right now, especially as a modern civilization. So we can say, well, there are other civilizations before us. They built cities, they built empires, and they destroyed themselves, or they faced cataclysms that took them out. You know what I mean? It can start to make us be a little more humble and be like, well, hey, maybe we should be a little more careful with what we're doing.
Yes. And please reiterate that message in your talk. I mean, I'm totally resonant with that. I think you just nailed it, what you just said.
And I think that's, to me, the reason why, because I'll be honest, like this is a little bit outside of my normal scope of events, what you guys are doing, but I spent some time like soul searching around it and like thinking about it. And again, I want to bring the message of what we're doing in longevity wherever I can, because I just think if there's people want to hear this, and I want people thinking about this, and I want to sort of share what I've been working on. But I realized actually the piece that you guys are bringing, which I think is really important, is if we could get the scientific community to recognize that there have been other civilizations before ours, that we didn't just sort of pop out of a rock 5,000 years ago and build a city and start farming, that maybe we would have a little bit more humility with what we're building. And that's when I realized, what you guys are doing is really important. And I hope that the scientific community would start to have some respect, or have more respect. And I think it is happening. It's unfortunately a slow process, to change these systems.
Yep. They get pretty much locked into paradigms, and it's hard to dislodge them. So
It just needs the millennial generation.
there we go. That's all it needs. On this earlier meeting I was doing, I was trying to get, I still can't ever get clear on, okay, X, Y, and Z, which is which. And
well, millennials is even in between them all, right? How do they go?
We're the bridge.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm a Gen Xer.
Okay, which means you're born when?
I was born between like 65 and 75.
Oh, okay. So then you're immediate post-boomer.
Yes. So there's the boomers, then there's the Xers. Yeah. And then I guess Y, and then millennials. And then now Gen Z.
Oh, so millennials get stuck in between.
Yes.
Y and Z. Okay, that's where I've been so confused.
Yeah, I know it is confusing the way they did it. I don't know why. I don't know who came up with that system. It's not clear.
So you would have come of age during the Reagan years.
Yes.
Pretty much.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So 1990s was like, because I was born in 72. So 1990, I turned 18.
1990, you turned 18.
So I'm chronologically 50 years of age right now, but I'm biologically 42, and I have the data to prove it. So I'm 8 years younger than my chronological age. So my goal is to continue to actually reduce that as time goes on.
Yeah.
So I'm doing some new protocols this year, and I'm trying to get my biological age down another year or two, but still age a year, but go back like 2. So in total, I'll go back 3 years by this fall. Wow. That's kind of what I'm trying to achieve right now.
I like that approach.
It's a lot of work, though. Let me tell you, it's a lot of work. The combination of exercise and diet and supplements, and I'm doing peptide therapy and IV therapy, and it's like there's actually a lot to it.
Okay, peptide to. I know.
He's like, look, I
I'm-
told you
I'm
I could.
looking forward to this. Listen, I'm going to be there and I'm going to be absorbing
You can be
I
taking notes.
can. Because, hey, I'm, like I said, I'm having a good time right now, and I'm not ready to get old and decrepit and check out anytime in the next 10 or 20 years,
Right.
That would suck.
All right. Well, we got to keep you around. So let's like get you on some longevity
Hey,
protocols.
now there's a guy who, that I can agree with. Let's keep him around. I'm all for that.